So we chose that title because we live in a world that so many of us, as parents, as educators, feel that we no longer can exert influence of our children, and particularly when it comes to the world, the virtual world, the world of technology, devices, social media. It's almost as if we've kind of held up our hands. So many of us feel despairing. We can't do anything anymore that's effective. We seem to threaten, we nag, we complain, we bribe, we ignore, we deal with the issues in all kind of ways, and nothing seems to quite being effective. Nothing seems to achieve what we want to achieve. And tonight's event is to reclaim some of that influence. Not just because we say that as a motivational thing to do, but because we want to explain why that is possible, why that can happen, and how that can happen. And you're in the hands of some very gifted people this evening who will help to communicate perspectives. And we'll mention briefly, I'll introduce those speakers briefly in a couple of moments. So it really is about powering up parental influence. That is tonight's purpose in our event. And just to give you a little bit of an outline of the structure of the evening, as soon as I'm finished with this introduction, Terry, and I'll be handing over to Terry Rubenstein, happens to be my wife, but is the founder of iHeart and our head of education. And she will then be introducing our very special guest speaker this evening, Ian Russell. Then Terry will be asking Ian some questions. We'll be showing a few videos. Then Terry herself will be speaking in a little bit more detail and specifically focusing on such an important theme, which is preparing our children for this road ahead, how to prepare our children. And then we'll be passing over into an expert panel. We have Professor Anthony Kessel, Yoav Besarai, plus Ian and Terry on the panel this evening. And Terry will be moderating that. And we will make sure we are finished absolutely no later than 9 o'clock. Before. There is a possibility, option later to send in questions, and we'll be inviting those. And some people sent in questions ahead of time, and thank you for that as well. So I just wanted to reflect on one thing before I step back, or actually those two things I want to say. The first is that this event is being put on completely for free. There's no charge for it, as part of iHeart, the charity, trying to generate awareness and, most importantly, education around this critical issue. The annual fundraising campaign in just under 2 weeks' time, the 12th and the 13th of March. And so we rely on that fundraising to fund all of the work that iHeart does, or almost all of the work. Very generous people. We ran our big annual campaign last year, and it was extraordinary, the generosity and the caring and the kindness. Over 1,900 people around the world helped to donate. So unapologetically, we'll be reaching out to people in a couple of weeks' time to ask you to help support our work, not just to make events like this possible, but actually the primary work that iHeart does, and the primary reason we raise funds as a charity, which is to support children, young people, and the people who support them, schools, teachers, and particularly those who are disadvantaged. We've got a philosophy here. We do not want funds or absence of money to ever be a barrier for people to benefit from our iHeart teachers. And some of what you'll be hearing tonight, we want to make always available no matter what. That's why tonight is an evening which we didn't charge for, because we never want a situation where somebody who can't afford to benefit from this critical learning in our work is unable to do so because either that funds or for some other reason related to that. So we'll be talking a little bit. We'll show you a very sneak preview of our campaign video at the end of the evening. It's very moving. And but otherwise, no further talk about fundraising tonight. But just know that that's something not too far down the road. And thank you to everyone for your support and generosity. It means a great deal to us. Finally, before I hand over to Terry, I wanted to mention a practical housekeeping point, which is that Terry actually had to fly suddenly to South Africa because of a family emergency. He's actually in Johannesburg overnight. One of the problems for those who know South Africa a little bit is load shedding. Believe it or not, the country and the main urban areas are often without electricity for significant times. It is possible that the electricity will go down. That's what load shedding means, when all the electricity goes on. If that happens, we're very fortunate. Charlotta, one of the senior faculty members and lead trainers of iHeart, has very kindly agreed to actually step out of a training she was running this evening. Debbie has taken over that whole training so that Charlotte is with us and on standby. She's been briefed and prepped, but of course, Charlotte knows this work and she's been helping to drive this work and drive this event. So in case Terry goes down without electricity, don't worry, Charlotte will be able to step in. And I'm just saying that in advance, just in case that does happen, but our prayers is that it won't happen. Housekeeping out the way, the final point I wanted to say is that a couple of months ago, I was in South Africa for a family event, family bar mitzvah. And actually, the bar mitzvah boy, as we call him, for those who don't know, a boy turns bar mitzvah in the Jewish religion when he turns 13, a girl when she's 12. And that's a critical moment where we transition into adulthood with sense of responsibility and obligations, which are not the case when a person is below that age. And I wanted to give a little speech. I was asked to speak at this family event to say something to the bar mitzvah boy. And our time together tonight should be to merit the speedy recovery of his mother, who's very unwell in South Africa. And the words I shared with the boy that day was, I wanted to give an example of one person I could think of. And the person who came, somebody who had done something, just like a relatively ordinary person, a member of society, who had done something quite extraordinary, remarkable, because I wanted the boy to get the message that it doesn't matter where you're coming from or what your story is. You can also do something extraordinary, remarkable if you set your mind to it. And the person who came to mind was Ian Russell, because Ian, just a week or two before I'd gone to South Africa for this event, you and Terry and I had sat and had lunch together in the iHeart Centre in Northwest London and spent some time together. And as always, we were so moved by your courage, by your fortitude, out of such tragedy, to say that no, you weren't just going to step back and say this had to happen. It didn't have to happen. You were going to take the fight to a fight that nobody thought really, let's be honest, could be won, and you're winning it. Honored to call you a personal friend, a friend of iHeart, and I really did give that message. I told them, I spent 10 minutes, I'm not going to do that now, telling them about Ian and telling the young man that anything's possible. Because Ian, by your own admission, I've heard you say on a podcast, I'm an ordinary guy from an ordinary family, but you're not, because you're doing extraordinary things. And we're really delighted to have you as our guest tonight. I hope I haven't stolen any of your thunder, Terry, but very special evening ahead on such a critically important topic, a topic where hopefully we have reclaimed our power as parents, as educators. We can influence our children. They do not have to disappear into a virtual world. There are ways to solve the dilemma. So stick with us for the next hour and 3/4 maximum, and hopefully you'll come away feeling that with that level of confidence and conviction as well. Without any further ado, over to you, Terry.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to say that I have got my phone on, which is very un-PC for an event like this. But the reason is because I've got load shedding and I'm using a generator. In case it's not coming through well, I want the team to call me and say, stop talking. And then I have an understudy, a fantastic one. Charlotte's going to take over for me. So let's see how it goes. As a way of introducing Ian, and Brian gave a little introduction, but many people do know of Ian and his story. But we put together a 5-minute video clip that introduces not only Ian's story, but the incredible work that he's done as a result of what he and his family went through. So I want to begin by playing that as a way of an introduction. Is that okay with you, Ian?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I'm flattered by all the wonderful introductions I've been given, and it's very much okay for you to play the video. I think that will be the best way to explain my story and Molly's story.
Okay, so here goes. I'm going to share screen for a moment, and
Molly was the youngest of 3 sisters. At the time, she seemed to be a very ordinary teenager. She was 14. She was future looking. She was enthusiastic. He handed her homework in that night. She packed her bags and was preparing to go to school the next day. And then when we woke up the next morning, she was dead. She left some notes, which I think we're lucky to have notes after her death, because she tried to explain how she felt. I'm the problem in everyone's life. I love you all. Stay strong. I'm proud of you. Bless you, Molly. Anyone who knew Molly, to the way that she would grow up, to the person she would become. She had so much to offer, and that's gone. We have to come to terms with that. The hard thing is, that's all gone with the help of the internet and social media.
An inquest into the death of Molly Russell has concluded that harmful online content was a factor in her death. The 14-year-old took her own life in 2017 after seeing extensive images and videos about suicide, depression, self-harm, and anxiety. Coroner Andrew Walker said Molly died from an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of the online content. Since her death, Molly's dad Ian has campaigned tirelessly for better internet safety. He welcomed the verdict on Friday.
For the first time today, tech platforms have been formally held responsible for the death of a child. It's time the toxic corporate culture at the heart of the world's biggest social media platform changed. It's time for the government's online safety bill to urgently deliver its long-promised legislation. It's time to protect our innocent young people instead of allowing platforms to prioritise their profits by monetising the misery of young people.
In the months before her death, Molly was exposed to particularly graphic content, which the coroner said would have normalised her condition. On Instagram alone, she saved 2,100 images, which were related to depression, self-harm, and suicide. Over the course of 2 weeks, the inquest heard from a number of experts and representatives of social media companies. The head of health and well-being at Meta, the owner of Instagram, was shown 6 months' worth of posts. Elizabeth Lagone admitted at least 2 violated the platform's guidelines, which prohibit the glorification, encouragement, and promotion of suicide and self-harm. However, she said the majority were safe for children to see, as people should be allowed to express themselves. Earlier, the court heard from Judson Hoffman, the head of community operations at Pinterest. He agreed that the site was not safe when Molly interacted with it before her death. He also apologised for emails such as this, which lured her back to the website. Child psychiatrist Dr. Navin Venugopal also gave evidence. He said he was unable to sleep after viewing the content Molly had engaged with. In his conclusion, the coroner said the content Molly was exposed to should not have been available for a child to see, and that the chance to make the internet safer must not slip away. He is now writing a prevention of future deaths report and will contact Meta, Pinterest, the government, and Ofcom.
Wow. So Ian, I've got a couple of questions for you, but before I ask them to you, I think there was something you wanted to add, a kind of a piece at the end of the video that hadn't yet happened when the video was filmed.
Yes, yes, Terry. There was mention there of the coroner issuing a prevention of future deaths report, which he did do, and the platforms that were involved. So Meta, Pinterest, Snap, Twitter, all got issued with a letter asking them to explain what they were doing to make the internet safer. They had 56 days to respond. Most of them responded within the time limit. One of them needed a little bit of extra time, but they've all responded now. And just to bring that to a close, I wanted to say nothing's very much changed. From what I have seen of their responses, it seems very much business as usual. And we all need to work together to help make our world safer, and in particular, the digital world safer for our children.
Thanks, Ian. And I think that's just a resounding emphasis on the fact that we can't put our children's safety in the hands of the tech companies. And so what we're going to speak about tonight is what can we do to essentially, our title is Stop Them Disappearing into this virtual world. So Ian, when I had you as a guest on the Resilience Files podcast, I had shown you a quote, which I'm going to now share with the audience. This was the quote. Okay, 1 second. So the quote is, "Prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child." Now, the interesting thing about this quote is that we had both agreed that this was very important and very relevant in today's times, because generally speaking, as parents, our intuition can be to dive in and try and rescue and save and fix and solve and, what's commonly known as helicopter parenting or snowplow parenting, where we clear the pathway so our children can have a smooth kind of path forward in life. And we had both spoken about how, that is disempowering for our children because it prevents them having to grapple and struggle and learn and adapt and uncover the innate resources that they need for life and for the challenges that life's going to inevitably throw their way. So we agreed about that, but you had said to me, and I'm going to show another, which really struck me. You said to me, but we have to understand what the road is in order to prepare our children for it. Do we actually know what this online road even is? And when I was asking our creative team to design the slide, I gave them things like online trolls and addictive algorithms and fake accounts and hidden dark content and so on. But I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. I was very struck by you saying that. And so I wanted to ask you, what is it that we need to know? What is it that most parents won't know and that you discovered only tragically after you lost Molly about this road? Could you give us a little bit of enlighten us about this?
I'll do my best, Terry.
Okay.
I think one of the problems is there's no definite answers. There's some concepts and there's some learnings that I'm very happy to share in the hope that they might help people. But it's a changing landscape. The road is twisty. The road is full of potholes, and it's quite hard to navigate. And then sometimes, quite unexpectedly, it could become icy or something completely different. And that's because the pace of change in tech is fast. So things move really quickly. And one of the biggest problems as a parent is keeping up with that tech. So if I go back to the beginning of my lived experience, the story with Molly, she was the youngest of 3 children. And we talked about being safe online. We'd attended the school e-safety classes for her older sisters as well as for her. And we thought it was part of our family life. But what we hadn't realized was that certain things had changed in the background of tech. So, for example, at the time, Molly was looking at content which turned out to be harmful, content that the coroner concluded played a part in her ending her own life. The platforms were changing the feeds, changing the content that they suggested to their users, and they were changing the feeds from what they called a chronological feed, which was basically the people who were closest to you, and everything in time order. So if you missed something, you missed it, and when you looked at your feed, you got the latest feeds. They changed from that to an algorithmic feed, and an algorithm is simply a little program that sits in the back of their product, trying to work out what you engage with in this case, and trying to suggest other content that is likely to keep you engaged on the platform. And we didn't really understand that had happened in 2016, 2017. I remember it being talked about, but I honestly don't think anyone really understood the implications of that feed, because the platforms designing systems that would suggest content that would keep any person, but particularly a young person, on their platform for as long as possible, because that's the way they make money, was something that hadn't really been thought through. So what it did in Molly's case was suggest content that was quite shocking. And we found this within a few weeks of her death by looking at her social media accounts. And among the people she followed, the normal pop groups, the celebrities that a 14-year-old would follow, we found content that was connected with self-harm, depression, anxiety, and suicide. And it shocked us that a global platform would have content that we instantly reacted to and thought shouldn't be on their platform. If we said, if we'd printed out some of the posts that Molly had been exposed to and put them on a hoarding at the side of the road in a town, there'd have been an outcry. The hoarding would have been ripped down, and people would have said, what are you doing? You can't let people see that. But this content was available globally on huge platforms, and Molly had been exposed to it. But when we said to the platforms, when that content was reported to the platforms, we thought we were doing them a favor, and they'd say, thank you for letting us know, we'll take that down. What in fact happened was they turned to us and said, that content doesn't infringe our community guidelines, and so we'll leave it up. And we really couldn't believe that that's what was happening. I've not met anyone since who thinks the majority of that harmful content is safe really for anyone, let alone a youngster, a teenager, with possibly the exception of Elizabeth Lagone, the meta witness who came to Molly's inquest. She's the only person I have heard describe content on Instagram that Molly saw that I'm horrified exists on such a global platform. She's the only person I've heard describe it as safe. So the first thing is just to accept that, as well as doing tremendous good, our digital world, which we all love, enjoy, and we probably couldn't easily live our lives without now, and it's here to stay, it comes at a price, and that price is it can be misused by people. And one of those misuses is for harmful content to be posted by individuals and for platforms to suggest that content to vulnerable users, to amplify algorithmically that harmful content to such an extent that it can move people away from a very happy, ordinary life towards contemplating suicide.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, just a small comment I wanted to make is that people might not know this, and I would hate people to think that you're exaggerating to the extent of what this content was. You know, every time you were on media, and I was following you on media in the last couple of years, you couldn't even show the content because it was too horrific to show. It was offensive. It would be called offensive to the viewers. And even in court, you told me on the podcast how people ran out crying, you know, and you couldn't present a lot of this. And recently you're working with the ministers who are passing the online safety bill to kind of show them, if you're writing in the policy, you should know what you're writing about. And again, they couldn't, when people were crying, some people walked out, you had to give them warnings. These are adults. And as we were saying, you know, Molly didn't have a choice, and our children don't have a choice. This is being kind of pushed their way. They just, you know, there's something they put into that equation that they write about, and it could be on a day they're feeling bad, etc. And then this is just pushed their way. So I just think it just stuns me that.
It's also true that you don't even need to be searching for harmful content
Really.
for the algorithms to latch on. There's research that's been done recently by Swansea University for Samaritans, and they found that 75% of people had seen harmful content online by the time they were 14. So 3/4 of our 14-year-olds have been exposed to harmful content online. And the key figure is that 83% of those people didn't seek it out. It found them.
Wow. Wow. So what else was, I mean, to me, that's enough. What you've just described is enough to say, like, I want to take away the devices and protect my child and never let them go on a social media site again. But is there anything else that you found out or that you want to share with parents that are listening?
So I think having seen that content and having seen what the platforms have done is they've inched along a road towards greater safety. They should be going faster, really, but they have made some changes. When Molly's story first broke in the UK in January of 2019, Instagram changed their community guidelines, for example, to no longer allow graphic self-harm material. I would have hoped, I would have believed that graphic self-harm material would have been very carefully controlled by the platform and not amplified algorithmically and spread to young people before that. But at least they've made a change. And then later that year, they also changed the community guidelines to stop suicide promoting content on their platform. So it became not allowed on their platform. That doesn't mean that's been effective, because we have recently looked, we check every so often. It's a strain to do it. We don't do it that often, but we've recently looked in the last month, and we continue to find harmful content online. So I think the first thing to do as a parent is to make sure you're aware that on some of the most popular platforms that are used by children everywhere, used by people everywhere, it's not that hard to find harmful content. And given those statistics that the Samaritans published, it's quite likely that anyone by the time they're sort of 14, it's more likely than not that they will have seen harmful content. So the first thing is to be prepared to talk about it as a subject. And I think that's a recurring theme that as we talk further this evening, we'll talk about. It's keeping talk and communications going so that if someone's found harmful content, they're enabled to come to you as a carer, as a parent, as a teacher, as a friend. They feel enabled to come and talk about it and to seek help and advice about what to do about it.
Ian, do you feel that, I mean, it sounds like from what, the conversations we've had in the past, that you had a very, very healthy, very good relationship with Molly, yet she didn't come to you. And so we can't expect our teenage children, who are going through a lot of turmoil and are often kind of trying to sort that out themselves. It's almost it seems to be an instinctive response that, we'd love teenagers to come and say, I need help and I saw this, but it's often not the way of teenagers. It definitely wasn't mine when I was growing up. I withdrew into my own little head and struggled internally. So it really is on us, I hear you saying, as parents, to start these conversations, to bring them up at the dinner table, to make them a part of life, so that it kind of gives the opportunity. Is that what you're saying, to our children to come and say, yeah, when we say, I heard that there was terrible content, has anyone ever seen? And then it gives them an opportunity to talk about it, not in a dramatic way, but just to bring it into the conversation.
I think it's far safer to talk about it than not to talk about it. There can be an instinct that says, well, I won't bring that up because that will just introduce someone who might not be aware of harmful content. They may go searching for it. But studies have shown it's far safer, just as it's far safer if you have concerns about an individual. Say you're worried, and in an extreme case, you're worried that some person may be thinking about ending their life. It's far safer to actually ask a direct question. and ask them, are you thinking about ending your life? Than not say anything. That's a really safe thing. And in terms of harmful content online, I think the same sort of thing applies. If you think of roads and road traffic accidents, and of course, sadly, there are casualties that are caused by the traffic that goes up and down our roads. No one is suggesting that there shouldn't be traffic, but I think everyone would agree that we should make our roads as safe as possible. And as a parent, you take your child outside carefully, and when they're very young, you hold their hand and you tell them off if they cross the road without looking, and you always talk about road safety. You don't bring that in as an afterthought. That's there from the very first moment you venture outdoors. And to extend that metaphor, that motoring metaphor, the tech companies at the moment have invented super fast cars, and they're traveling at great speed along an information superhighway, if you like. But what they haven't done is to invent the seatbelt or the airbag, and they haven't put speed limits along the roads, and they haven't put speed bumps in, and side impact bars are something that's way off in the future. So while we're in that situation, it's particularly important to do the digital equivalent of holding your child's hand and talking about internet safety, just as we would about road safety.
Yeah, and that's so helpful, and it makes so much sense. I mean, we do that in all other aspects of our children's life, and I feel like, and which is a bit of a theme of tonight, that somehow we can feel so intimidated by this kind of modern world that, you know, is kind of, we feel like dinosaurs, and our kids are so much more literate on it that we almost just feel, okay, we'll just step back here and not do our usual kind of instinctive parental duty. It almost feels so overwhelming that we'd rather just abstain and say it's too much for us, it's pervasive, you know, and just we'll kind of step back and hope that our children have kind of got this. And you're saying, no, we wouldn't do that in any other area of their lives. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, no, it's really important. And actually, I think you can involve children in that whole conversation. It's not a one-way conversation. It's not from parent to the child. Quite often the children are the best people at tech. They're young and savvy, and they pick it up and they adapt to it, and it changes really quickly. So they follow it. And if you involve them, if you get them to explain to you how a platform works, what's good about it and what's bad about it, and what we can do to make it safer, and empower them to educate you, so it becomes a collective decision, I think that's one of the most important things you can do to try and keep those channels of communication open.
I love that you said that, because I'm actually going to bring in a story about that a little bit further along, where that's exactly what I did with one of my children. And I encourage people to do that, to say to a child, what do you think? You draw up a contract about responsible usage, knowing what you know, etc. And then we'll look at it and see if I'm good to sign on the dotted line. It's really impressive when you put that on children, what they come up with. So that's a great practical takeaway. Ian,
There are
anything else?
Yes, I was just going to mention there are places you can go to look as well. In the UK, there's the UK Safer Internet Centre, and they have tips and advice for parents. So you can look at particular platforms. You can run down a whole list of digital platforms, and it will tell you about them, explain them to you, and give you good background on them, so you can better understand them. So you can do a bit of homework on them. And the UK Safer Internet Centre, one of the resources it has is a service called Report Harmful Content. And in the first instance, if you go online and search for Report Harmful Content, they will guide you about using the platform's reporting mechanisms to report harmful content, in the hope the platforms will take it down. And you can do that. And if their content is hard and harmful, and if it's not taken down, you can contact them again, and they will escalate the problem and help you to communicate with the platforms in a particular sort of way, because they've got the expertise to get the greatest chance of having content removed that is considered harmful. And they give an example that sometimes one of the online harms that might happen is impersonation. Someone would take over or impersonate someone's account and say things that person would never say or do. And if you report that as harmful content, it's unlikely to be taken down, because it's unlikely that the content is harmful in a way that might involve self-harming or eating disorders or any of the more obvious things. So you have to use a different channel. And if you report that content to the platforms and say it's impersonation, you're usually much more successful, because that's the problem with the content. And people understandably just go up the wrong avenue in the reporting platform. So I'd always recommend checking out the report harmful content function on the UK Safer Internet Centre website.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ian. And, if anyone wants to comment in the live stream or post any other sites they know that are helpful to go to in your kind of part of the world, then please feel free to do so. So, Ian, I just wanted to see if you said what you want to say for now, because we are going to have around 45 minutes at the end of a panel, and you're going to be available to answer all questions that people are going to put in the chat. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions. But I just wanted to check in with you before we finish this section of our live stream.
No, absolutely. I certainly don't want to hog the evening, Terry. There's so much more to come. So I'll sit back and listen with interest and be here for the Q&A towards the end. And hopefully there'll be lots of questions, and I'll learn something as well. I'm sure that will be the case.
And that is just you, Ian, humble and incredible. So thank you. Thank you so much. So what I wanted to do now is I wanted to share 4 what I hope will be foundational and practical ideas that are going to help us parents power up our influence, as is the title of this event, because we really should be our children's biggest influencers. I really feel that strongly from my heart. We should be our children's biggest influencers. So how do we power up our influence? And also, how do we help prepare our child for this virtual world or this virtual road in a way that they can travel it with confidence and security and consideration? So that's what I'm going to be, that's what we're going to be looking at. So the first idea that I wanted to share with you is, I'm just going to get it, teaching our children that they have everything they need inside of them to deal with life's challenges. So teaching our children that they have everything they need inside of them to deal with life's challenges. And there's a quote that I love to quote. It's by the Irish novelist Samuel Beckett. And he said, "We're on earth, there's no cure for that." We're on earth, there's no cure for that. And the first time I heard this, and I can see Ian gives a little smile, but most people have that reaction. We give a little chuckle. And that's because it really does feel like oftentimes life is a struggle. It's like a malady that we need a cure for. And there doesn't seem to be one around. Well, I want to say to Samuel Beckett, you're wrong. There is a cure for life on earth. And that cure is that we're born with well-being. We're born with everything we need inside of us for life. And that's the cure for life on earth. And that's what we need to teach our children, because most of them won't know this. I for sure grew up not knowing this. It took me till the age of 29 to know this for myself. When I grew up, I think it's very common amongst young people and old people, but for sure young people, I felt that I lacked what I needed for life. I felt that if I could just be prettier and smarter and a nicer person and get better exam results and be more seen and more heard and more popular, then that would give me what I needed for life. And so I felt that there was a lack. And this for sure is amplified by all the messaging that we hear on social media, this messaging of lack. Now, what happened for me, and I'll just tell you in 2 minutes, although it is a longer story than that, is that at the age of 29, when I was going through a major depression, and I tried to take my own life. I had 5 young children at the time. And when I came out of hospital, thank God I didn't succeed. There were 6 weeks in which I felt, I was almost enveloped by this feeling of feeling deeply okay. I felt free and I felt peaceful, and life looked simple and beautiful, and my mind felt crystal clear. And this was so confusing to me, because all those things that I thought I needed in order to give me that kind of feeling, to make me feel good to go, weren't fixed. I hadn't even tweaked them. And yet I felt this inside of me, and I wondered, where did this come from? And I often quote this quote that I'm going to quote for you now. It's part of a poem. It's a quote by the existential philosopher Albert Camus. And they built a whole poem around his quotes. And the quote goes like this, and this really describes what I discovered in those moments that were so transformational for me. He says, "In the midst of winter, I found within me an invincible summer. In the midst of hate, I found within me an invincible peace, an invincible love. In the midst of chaos, I found within me an invincible peace. In the midst of tears, I found within me an invincible smile. And this made me happy because I knew that however hard the world pushed at me, there was something within me that was stronger, that was better, that could push right back." And that's what our children need to know. They need to know they have that. That's the world will push at them, but there's something within them that's stronger, that's better, that can push right back. And this is something we have to teach our children. Now, one of the things that we need to understand, all of us, is that this is not going to be intuitive to our children. And I want to tell you why by giving you a metaphor. When we come into this world, how it looks to most of us is that there are a whole bunch of things that can give us this invincible summer, that can make us feel good to go, give us a sense of well-being, and take it away from us. Okay, and we'll start off with teddy bears. You know, when a child's young, we give them a teddy bear or a blanket or comforter, and they sit there and cuddle or hold or play with their comforter, and it feels like it's giving them a sense of security. They feel, oh, I'm good to do life now that I've got my comforter and my teddy, right? So they've misattributed something that's within them, because we understand that a piece of material, an inanimate object that's stuffed with two little beady eyes, cannot give them a sense of security. They're feeling something that's innate within them and misattributing it to a teddy bear, to a blanket. And then what happens is they grow older and they might discard their comforters, but they start to replace them with adult teddy bears. That's what we start to do. You can say teen teddy bears and adult teddy bears. Things like, oh, if I only looked better, then that would give me a sense of security. If I was only more popular or more included or more respected or more appreciated or more seen, that would make me feel like I was good enough. You know, and you can go on to say, as we mature and even grow older, financial security. If I only had that much in my bank or that much status or recognition or career success, that makes me feel secure. And if not, it takes it away from me. And what we can do as parents is we can start to challenge these teddy bears. When we see our children misattributing something that's within them to something else, saying that that person not include me made me feel terrible, took away my good feeling, we like, no, it doesn't work that way. And every single time we see our child relaxed, because when we relaxed, we naturally, in our well-being, we feel these qualities naturally, and you see them feeling good about themselves and being insightful and being their best selves, we want to point out to them, this is something that's within you always. And the next time you get a poor exam result or someone doesn't include you, they can't take this away from you. This feeling you're feeling right now, how you're showing up right now, that's your natural state. That's you. That's built into you. So this is messaging that we can continually give our children through their childhood, through their teenage years, and it's incredibly powerful. And I wanted to share a story with you about Charlotta, who's, I think Brian mentioned, in case things go wrong, is going to jump in for me. She went out to South Africa to do some iheart lessons in a school. And I'm going to read you a story about a girl that she worked with, because what Charlotta was trying to teach these children is that their innate well-being is more powerful than anything. And it's more powerful than even any negative feeling they'll ever feel. So here's the story. There was a young girl who participated in an iheart lesson at school. She was 12 years old at the time and suffered from chronic anxiety. Her anxiety was so bad that she missed most sessions because she just couldn't bear being at school. She made the iheart session where the class was asked to make objects from Play-Doh, but were challenged to make them in the actual Play-Doh tub. She seemed to enjoy doing this. As the facilitator approached her to ask her what she'd made with the Play-Doh, she showed the Play-Doh tub with bright red Play-Doh welling over the edges of the tub. "This is my anxiety," she said. "It's completely out of control. It's so enormous that it can't even stay in the tub." The facilitator reflected for a moment and then asked the girl, "How's the tub doing?" The girl looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" she asked. How's the tub? Insisted the facilitator. The tub is fine, the girl answered, still puzzled. That's right, said the facilitator and smiled. It's perfect. It's intact. It isn't harmed one bit. Then she was silent and looked kindly at the girl. Oh, she exclaimed, you mean that I am too? 100%, said the facilitator. You're 100% okay, completely unharmed. She knew there was a lot more that the girl was going to have to work through, but she also knew that the girl had a glimpse of insight about her unconquerable well-being, which would give her the ability to handle her anxiety and help move her forward. I think that's a very powerful story, and you don't need to be an iHeart facilitator to begin this messaging and to begin sharing this with your children. So that's the first idea. I'm going to be sharing, I think they're very powerful ideas. I hope people listening feel that too. I wish I had longer to spend on each one, but I want to give you a few because sometimes one resonates with you and sometimes another doesn't. So the second one is one that I think is really overlooked by parents. It's something that we think, yeah, of course we know that to be true. And that is the value of rapport as a way to model connection and influence our children in a positive way. The value of rapport. Now, I can't tell you how life-changing, game-changing this was for me as a parent of 6 boys, bringing up 6 boys and teenagers. So I want to just go step by step and define what I mean by rapport. So rapport is a mutual feeling of warmth, a feeling of goodwill. It's what allows us to listen and interact without judgment. Good rapport feels like allies. We feel allied to the other, right? So what's a lack of rapport? So a lack of rapport feels cold and uncomfortable, tense, distant. It's hard to communicate and discussions just don't go anywhere. You feel like adversaries, right? And there was a mentor of mine that used to describe rapport like a savings account. And each time you put a deposit in, it means that there's a feeling of warmth, you feel close. And each time that you take a withdrawal, it feels the opposite. It feels very negative and cold. And the bigger the balance, the more you're able to have difficult conversations, to resolve things, to listen to each other. And the more the withdrawals, the bigger the withdrawals, the more difficult those conversations are, the more tense those interactions are. And so we have to nurture the savings account because there will be, as parents, withdrawals and there will be deposits. That's going to happen. But we really want to make sure that there's a good amount in the savings account. Now, I'm going to speak about how we nurture that and how we ensure that. But I just wanted to give 2 tips to check your rapport levels, just to kind of an honest check-in. And this is something I used to use a lot with my boys. There were 6 of them. So it was like, how do I check what my rapport is with each one? And they would come to mind for me, and I'd visualize an almost internal rapport thermometer and think, how warmly do I feel? How high is the temperature? And that's good now, not bad in this thermometer. And if it was high, if it felt warm, I felt a feeling of warmth for this child, I'd feel that's good. And if it was cold and low, I was like, my rapport's not really good. I've got to check in on this. Another way is to ask yourself, am I my child's greatest? Do I feel like their greatest ally or their greatest adversary? Not their greatest, but do I feel like their ally or their adversary? And I'll tell you how you can check that very easily. You know, oftentimes, you're speaking to your partner, or to your wife, your spouse, your husband, and you hear yourself talking about your child. Oh, they're so difficult, what they did today, and you're almost moaning and complaining about them as if they're like, a terrible imposter, terrible deviant. And then there's a way you can talk about them, whoever it is. Jack's really struggling, he's really acting out at the moment. Like we need to kind of get to the bottom of it because I can see something's not right with him. There's a different tone. Can you hear? The one's a tone of frustration and the one's a tone of warmth. And that's something that we can all check in with. So why is rapport so important and how do we keep it high? So the reason rapport is so important is because when there's a good feeling of rapport between people, you want to hang out with those people. You want to spend time with those people. As a family, you want to play board games or go out and have picnics or go on family holidays or hang out together, or you go do what the child, if they love football matches, go see a football match with them and so on. But you like to hang out together. And when we hang out together with a feeling of rapport, the metaphor that comes to mind for me is it's almost like you're building a room that's the center of the house. You know, it's a room that has a fireplace and it has a warm rug, and it's where the child can really be themselves, right? Show up as themselves, their true selves. And it's also where proper connection happens, human connection, real connection, not the pseudo connection that often happens, the more superficial connections that are happening on social media, real connections. And in those times, right, when we're connecting, it's not always pretty. I like to call it, in my household, it used to be functionally dysfunctional. Functionally dysfunctional. That's what we were. And because you do irritate each other and you do have breakdowns at time in the relationships, but because you're going to see each other again the next day, you have to learn how to make up. You have to learn how to resolve things. And all of that is very real. And that's what relationships are about. And what it does is it allows your child to go to the Twitter room, to visit the Instagram room, to visit the Snapchat room. And they might even be a little bit influenced there. But there's some place in them that this will anchor them. This will be a refuge. This will be a North Star for them. They will have some modeling about what proper human connection is. And that will stand them in good stead. Maybe not even in the short term, you won't see the results of it, but guarantee you, as they mature, they'll have a North Star for what real connection is that they'll always come back to. So that's the first thing of how powerful rapport is. The second point is that, as we kind of alluded to before, it creates a feeling of goodwill. When there's warmth between people, there's goodwill, and then there's respect. And that opens us up to being influenced by another, right? And I often think about it, if you think about someone in your life right now that you feel very warmly to, they come to mind and you just feel warmly to, if they had to come up to you and say, okay, Terry, I need to give you a piece of feedback, you know, are you okay with that? You're going to say, of course, sure, I'd love to hear your feedback, you know, because you know they have your best interests at heart. If somebody came up to you who you don't have good rapport with, and said to you, listen, I want to give you some feedback, you'd immediately start to bristle and get defensive and shut down. So rapport is kind of the fertile ground in which our children open themselves up to learning from us. They open themselves up to our wisdom, to our influence. And I cannot tell you how important that was in my relationship with my boys. And I could see a link between how much I felt I could influence them in a positive way, how open they were to my wisdom and influence when the rapport was high, as to oppose when the rapport was low, when there were too many withdrawals. This is not a perfect game. This is just something that, you know, we're not perfect as parents, but that we want to have the eyes and the heart for and the awareness around. So this brings us, I guess, to the crunch of the matter, okay, which is, how do we keep our rapport high? Well, I wanted to say that our level of rapport will always match how committed we are to not accepting bad rapport, right? And that might sound very simplistic, okay? That your level of rapport is always going to be in sync with how committed you are to not accepting bad rapport. And if you just think about in life, like how committed you are to someone, I mean, this is a very poor metaphor, but I'm just thinking, like, my husband is he's incredibly committed to go to the gym. There's not much that he'll sacrifice to go to the gym and to make sure that he stays fit, right? Because he's incredibly committed to that. Now, I wanted to talk about this idea by showing you a picture that I think maybe will explain it and build on what we've been speaking about. So I'm going to share again, and I'm going to go to the next slide over here. So if you look over here, here's the parent, okay? And the parent is standing in their world of well-being, their psychological world of well-being. That's the prism and the world through which we see life. And you can see that built into it is this invincible summer, that they have what they need for life. They have all the qualities of peacefulness, of clarity of mind, of feeling deeply okay, of connectedness, of optimism, of resilience. It's all built into their world. It's built in. It's a done deal. Here's the child, and the child too has their own separate world of well-being through which they see and interact with life. Now, I'm going to show you the next picture. Now, notice in this picture a few things. First of all, the world of what the glow of well-being is missing. And that's because as humans, we often discount it. We overlook it. We don't know that it's there. We don't know that we have what we need for life inside of us. And as soon as we overlook it, we start to create these rules, which are really like those adult teddy bears that I spoke about, the things that we think we need in order to feel secure, the things that we think we need in order to protect our worlds of well-being, right? And so here, the parents have just written a few. I need structure and routine. I need respect. I need you to sleep. And here's the young child's. These are his teddy bears, what he feels he needs in order to protect his world and keep it secure. I need my space. I need time to chill. I need to chat online. Now, invariably, they're going to be, your rules are going to start to clash with your child's. And that's where we sacrifice the rapport. In those battles, we sacrifice the rapport. And the thing is that if we prepared to, and we won't always be able to do this, but even if we can do this sometimes, surrender our flag. Say, I know I need you to sleep and you need to chat online, but I'm actually going to put that down because I don't want to sacrifice rapport. I don't want to scream and shout and have a negative interaction, which is a withdrawal out my rapport deposit right now, my rapport savings account. I'd rather put down the flag. And in the thing that happens when you do that, you put a deposit into your account, and later you'll be able to have that conversation. It's not that you won't address that, but you'll be able to have it. You'll have created the fertile ground through which that conversation can be nourished and can grow in a very positive way. So that's just something that we want to keep a lookout for, which is not sacrificing rapport because of rules that we think we need right now, and those will invariably clash with our child's. So that's the idea about rapport. And now I'm going to move over to the third idea. I'm just going to stop sharing for one moment. Okay. The third idea is a big one, and it's one parents struggle with a lot. It's very difficult for us, and it's being okay with your child not being okay or happy with you. Being okay with your child not being okay or happy with you. I cannot tell you how many parents I've met over the past 17 years of working in the field of mental health and resilience that say, there's no ways I can take that away from Johnny. Like, he'll go crazy. Or like, if I had to tell Taz that she can't be on Instagram until 12 o'clock at night, she'll go nuts. All her friends are on that, I can't do that. And we'll all have our own versions of that. And essentially what we're saying is, I can't be okay if my child's not okay or happy with me. And the question that I want to ask us as parents is, why not? Why can't we be? Our children are not meant to be happy with our decisions. They grow up they don't come out the womb as wise sages. They come out the womb wanting what they want. I want that thing in order to feel okay. I need that. I need to be talking to my friends to be included in order to feel okay. And so we need to be okay. We need to have a higher level of tolerance when our children are not happy with our decisions, when they tantrum, and those tantrums look different, 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, or an 18-year-old, or maybe not that different. But you want to understand that we want to, if you want to win the war, then you're going to lose that battle. Your child's not going to be happy in the short term, but in the long term, there will be huge, huge gains. And I want to show you some of the gains that we'll hopefully acquire if we're able to tolerate our children's unhappiness, not being happy with our decision. So the power of parenting from the inside out, not being influenced by children's reactions, is going to pay dividends. Because firstly, we're going to be parenting the health in our children. We're going to be parenting the robustness in our children. Yes, we think you're robust enough to not get what you want and not be happy right now, and that you'll be okay with that that's okay. Our children are going to receive a strong message that we have faith in their ability to get over their upset and return to their well-being. There's a strong message. We don't even have to say it. Like, we're okay with you not being okay. As humans, we all get off track. We all get in our heads. We all get kind of unhappy at times. But I'm not worried about that, because you'll come back to yourself. I know that. And thirdly, our child will feel secure, even if they react badly. It's children's jobs to push the boundaries. That's what they're meant to do. And it's our job to push back where appropriate. Because, we want to show our children that if you give a child too much space, then they're going to step in and take that space. And a child with too much power feels very insecure. And it's actually hard to get that power back after you've given it away, but it's still, you can get it back. So don't get despondent. But really, when a child feels that you're in control, they feel secure. And I want to give you a story that illustrates this point that we've been speaking about. So I'm going to just stop sharing for a moment and share with you a story from my children, bringing up my children. So I'm going to try not to name and shame here, so I just need to be careful with this. But one of my 6 boys, who had a few brothers ahead of him, at the age of 12, he was going into high school, into year 7 in the UK, wanted a device, he wanted a smartphone. And some of his older brothers had got a smartphone at that age, and some hadn't. And I was not keen on him getting this at all. My husband and I were very into looking at each child. We don't see fairness as giving each child the same thing. We see fairness as giving each child what they need and what's good for them, the right thing for them to grow into, to evolve and grow into their best potential and version of themselves. So I felt that he wasn't able to have the discipline to self-regulate on the device at this age. So I said no, and he wasn't happy. Okay, and he had a good argument. He told me that his friends he just wants it for WhatsApp because that's how they arrange football matches. He's a very good football player. He's very sporty, and he's going to be left out the matches because all his friends, bar one, I don't know if there were 80 or 70 children, they all were having smartphones. And so I thought that was reasonable, and I said to him, okay, I'm prepared to consider it, but as Ian was saying earlier, you need to drop the contract of good usage of this that you think I'll be happy with. And it was very good. I must say that he could be a lawyer. He came back with a brilliant contract, and it had things like when he could use it, that he, would have a strong filter on, wouldn't have access generally to the internet, only certain apps like a sport app and WhatsApp that he liked, and etc. And he wouldn't take it into his bedroom at night, and a whole bunch of things. Anyhow, 24 hours into having this, 1 strike, probably another week, 2, 3 strikes, and he was out. Okay, I wasn't surprised, I have to say. Maybe that's unfair. Anyhow, took away the smartphone, the device, and he was incredibly unhappy. Incredibly unhappy. It felt like he was torturing me for maybe, I don't know, I think it was 3 months, but it was probably less than that. It might have been 6 weeks, but it felt like a long time, right, that I had to tolerate his distress. But I felt I was right about this. And what was interesting is that after the time frame, whatever it was, 3 months, 6 weeks, he stopped moaning, got on with life. He had a brick phone and never lost out on any of football matches. Right through his high school career, he played all the football matches and actually got to the stage where a whole group of his friends decided to discard their smartphones and get an old Nokia brick phone because they felt it was too distracting and it wasn't good for their souls, so to speak. But, and when he was 18, I told him when he's big enough to leave the house, he'll make that decision for himself. But he never asked me for it again. So that's just a story. And by the way, he wasn't deprived. He got things that a lot of the other boys didn't get. He liked nicer football boots, and so I got him trendy football boots because he was a good football player. So he wasn't deprived in any way. But we really felt like this was the right decision for him. And he, in hindsight, has come back to me, which kids often do when they mature, when they leave home and say, I really respect the decision you made. It wasn't so easy for me on the time, but it was good for me. And because we had that rapport, it didn't break our relationship. The rapport was essential to us being able to follow through with this. So I want to give you a few tips because it isn't easy to be resilient when you want to parent from what's right. So I'm going to give you just a couple of tips here to kind of hold yourselves to remember if you're going into these kind of conversations. Tips to help parent resiliently when we know our child will not react well. Number 1, step back. Take your child's feelings out of the equation and get in touch with what you feel the right thing to do is, and do that. And what I mean is, when you're speaking to your spouse or partner or friend and you're saying, I just wish I could only let him be on his whatever it is, 2 hours a day, or whatever it is you as his parent feel is right. Well, that's what you want to go with. Because oftentimes we say, but I can't because they'll go crazy or all their friends or et cetera, et cetera. And when I say do that, I don't mean impulsively, like we want to be compassionate and sensitive, but I mean that you start to begin that process of making sure that you get to that end point, if that's what you feel is the right thing to do. So the second one, don't expect your child to be happy with your decisions. That's not the result you're looking for. Often it feels like that will be the best result if he's happy or she's happy with our decisions. No, they don't need to be happy. It's a bonus. Of course, we'd love our children to be, but it's not the result we're looking for. Number 3, allow them to be unhappy. It's a great learning for them. As humans, we learn loads when we're unhappy. That's when we do our biggest learnings, because we have to get out over ourselves. We have to dig deeper. Remind yourself that their discontent can't make you discontent. Well, it only can if you allow it to. And what I mean by that is coming back to this invincible summer that we have within us. Our well-being is within us, and our children's well-being is within them. And they're being discontent, we can stay in our well-being. The two aren't connected by, often we feel as parents, they're connected by umbilical cord, but it's not true. And the last one is just a little awareness. If you're trying to please and appease, sometimes we're trying to please and appease our children. That's just a nice sign, a little sign that we're off track. So step back and get reflective. It's a good time to get reflective. So that's some tips to help us kind of stand our ground and parent resiliently, parent from what's right. And that's going to really power up your influence. That's when you're going to feel like I do have influence over my children. And I do have influence in this realm of social media. Now, our third point, our last point, this is the last one of the evening. I am just looking for it over here. Okay, so I can't find it over here, but I'm going to show you a little slide which encapsulates it. It's using social media, teaching our children that they can use social media without it using them. What if your child could use social media without it using them? And you know that oftentimes, right, it feels, I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment. Oftentimes, it feels like social media is the puppeteer and our children are the puppets. It almost feels like it's playing with their feelings. Like as soon as the internet connection doesn't work, they explode. As soon as they start doing badly in gaming, they get really agitated and frustrated, and then they do well and their feeling state goes up. They start to get jealous or mad when they start to see their friends posting things on social media about their relationship status or their achievements. And then they get upset because they post something and it's ignored or it's trolled. And then they feel validated and feel on the high because people notice their posts and there were a lot of likes or whatever it is, streaks or whatever you get on these sites. You can see how much I need this educating. So it almost feels like they're being played with like puppets. And I want to show you a short video, which it's part of a digital program called Ignite, which we created for young children aged around 9 to 11, 12, that talks about this phenomena and speaks about the antidote to it. So I'm going to share it and play this little clip with you before we start to get to the end.
Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go with Kaya from South Africa. Hi, Kaya.
Hi, Yoav. Hi, Needham. I've already been enjoying watching. Put it to the test. But to be honest with you, I've had the worst week ever. I posted a picture of myself at a festival on Instagram, and I was so badly trolled. I was called a loser, a show-off, a weirdo, and stuff that I didn't even want to repeat. I wish I never even posted that stupid picture in the first place.
Hi, Kaya. Firstly, we're sorry you're having such a rough time. Social media can be really tricky to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, I agree, Yoav. Sometimes I love it, and then sometimes I just never want to go on it again.
But Kaya, here's an important question. What if you could use social media without it using you?
What do you mean by that, Yoav?
Well, social media seems to control most of us. It's like we're puppets on a string. If we get lots of likes or streaks or good comments, then we feel good about ourselves. And then we want to post more to get more. But if we get bad comments like you did, then we feel bad about ourselves and we feel angry and hurt.
Yeah, that's so true. I just really hate social media controlling me like that. Can I stop it without stopping to use social media?
Well, Kaya, it's all about understanding where the power lies. The good news is that the power lies within your innate superpowers. Your security and confidence are in you. No one, Not even a bully or a troll can steal it from you. Firstly, they're just humans that are way, way down the off-track road and behaving really badly. Their well-being is covered up by some pretty dark clouds, and they have no idea how to uncover it. But more importantly, remember that your mind is your own. It is free, and no one has the power to jump into it and put feelings in you. If you remember this, it will uncover your innate superpowers. You'll have access to calm, wise thinking, and will know when to post and when to have a break, and also how to handle those people behaving badly. You'll have the resilience and inner strength to either address it or just ignore them.
You know, Yoav, if I could put that into practice, I think I would feel so much better and so much less afraid of people being mean. Thank you so much for your help. It makes a lot of sense, and it sounds so freeing.
Okay, and thank you to Kaya for that. So I want to show you another slide just to wrap up this little point. So what essentially Kaya was learning about there was that her mind's free, that her mind is her own and her mind's free, and that no one can hijack it. And as you can see on the right-hand side, climb up with a little stepladder and put things into it, not good nor bad. And when a child knows that, when a human knows that, it's almost like a protective shield, like Yoav was talking about in that clip. It creates a protective shield where they can then, their innate well-being, their qualities, their intelligence, their wisdom, their security can kind of reign free. And they can decide, well, how am I going to deal with this person who's really not behaving badly? So that's something, again, that these are the same messages, but if we can teach our children these messages, because I guarantee you they, for the most part, are not learning them out there in the worlds that they're interacting with most of the time, these kind of virtual worlds. And even in the non-virtual world, often these messages are not heard enough. So the final slide I wanted to show you is coming back to our road. And this has kind of been the theme for tonight. I'll kind of prepare the child for the road. The biggest preparation I personally think how we can prepare the child for the road is for them to understand that no one and no thing can steal their well-being. Well-being isn't something that a person trolling them, that a person criticizing their looks, that an exam result, that somebody else's triumph or good life can take away from them, that their well-being is within them. And the more that we share this message with young people, the more empowered they will be to go out into life and feel that they're bigger than life. Life's not too big for them. And I wanted to share just to end a little video of some children who have been learning this message. As I keep saying, you don't have to learn this message only. If you're somewhere that you could have an iHeart program, I think that's fantastic, and you should get one into your school or your home, etc. But if you can't, these are simple messages that we as parents can start to share with our children. So here's some children sharing how learning these messages have affected them and helped them.
It's because first I was like, yeah, well-being is just like your brain, but it's not. It's so much more than that. It's like, it's what you think, what you feel, and like, it's kind of like what you are truly. So iHeart helped me like reach in and get out like my true self, to like realize what I really was, and like to help me reach my full potential.
So I think one thing that's really useful for me is what others say isn't true. It's what matters, what you think is true. Because like if someone tells me that I didn't come first place, or like you're not good at sports, doesn't make that true. Like it's what you believe. And I've used that for certain situations, which like it was really helpful for me.
When I read the little text that they gave us, it was really fascinating, and it meant a lot to me. And then I realized that I can be anything. I can do anything. No one can be in charge of me. I've been more resilient after having iHeart sessions. I've done more work than before. And my mom always found lots of changes in me as well. She said that you're really much more resilient and more concentrated on the work that you're getting. it helps me to feel like that we're all different and some of us might not be feeling like the same things. And if people judge us, just let them judge. But it never means anything. Like say for example, somebody calls you a rude name or something, just ignore it. It doesn't have the power to put a bad feeling inside you.
Because everybody at some point attaches their well-being, and especially in high school when you're doing exams and you have friendship problems, you have to realize that if something doesn't go the way you want it to, that's okay, because your well-being is always there. And if you do bad in a test, your well-being is still there. It's not like going to leave your body.
It truly taught me that in situations where I'm not okay, I actually am deep down. I can feel that I am. And I didn't know that until I started. And I didn't realize it until I started, because in situations since I've started where people try to run me down or say mean things, like I take a few deep breaths and I just remind myself, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't faze me. It's not, they don't define me. They don't tell me who I am. I'm myself. And that's like the biggest thing that I took out of this.
So I'm going to let the kids have the final word. And I'm now going to pass over to Brian, who's going to introduce our panel. And we're going to open up for the Q&A part of the evening, where you're free to ask your questions. If people have already put questions in, we're going to have somebody that will let us know what those questions are. So Brian, do you want to make yourself seen and heard? I can see we have Professor Anthony Kessel. You've already one of our panel members joining us. Thanks for joining us, Ant. Nice to see you. And Ian, if you want to put on your camera again. And there we have Yoav. Brian, would you like to introduce our two new guests? Okay.
I'll just do that. I've been instructed as a person who's done a lot of the behind the scenes work to make tonight happen, to encourage people to please subscribe on YouTube, hit the like button on Facebook. All of these things helps to generate awareness for our work. And so please do those things. Those of you who know how to use social media more effectively than I, please do that. So very briefly, I don't want to spend long on introductions. We're gonna have about 20 or 25 minutes for our panel before we wrap up this evening. But Ian, you've all met already. Professor Anthony Kessel, who happens to be a trustee of iHeart, is a person, if anybody has 15, 20 minutes, go onto Wikipedia and you can read Anthony's biography or profile. I'm slightly exaggerating, but not by much. He's an incredibly accomplished academic, a senior public health official. Personally, what touches me the most deeply is that he's the senior advisor, public health advisor to the Football Association, which is where my deep love lies. Not so much the public health, but the Football Association side. He's just all around a superb person. He has over 100 academic publications and has been a great friend and colleague and support to our work here at iHeart for many years now. So Anthony, really brilliant to have you. And in addition to that, of course, more recently has become a very accomplished author with a special book series and children's book series, which addresses some of the core themes published by Crown House, and it addresses many of the core themes of well-being and resilience and young people that we teach in our work. So Anthony's really a man, a real Renaissance man, and a man of many talents. And then I just wanted to introduce Yoav. Yoav's also a Renaissance man because he is the star of the Ignite program. You guys just saw a little bit of a taste of the Ignite program. He's one of the two actors that we brought in specially, but he's also a trained iHeart facilitator. We specially wanted the Ignite program to be taught the actors to be have at least one of them was somebody who really knew. Yoav himself was trained and has recently been accepted into and is now well into his first year of study. Is it correct saying RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts? Have I got that right? So not only a gifted conveyor of these core principles of well-being and resilience that we teach at iHeart, but a gifted actor. Yoav, please remember all those little people who helped you get there when you got up that one day to receive that Academy Award, okay? Just remember us. And with no further ado, over to you, Terry, and questions to the panel. And please put your questions in function if you so wish to now, and some of you have done so already and sent in questions beforehand.
Okay, I just wanted to say also about Yoav that if people want to address questions, why I thought he'd also be such a valuable member is that he's young and he has more than us oldies grown up with this world of social media and navigating it. And so he's had the real life experience of that. And then of course he's now worked with a lot of young people as well. So I think he has life experience to share with us. Okay, so Sandra, are you going to give us some questions? Because we aren't seeing the questions coming through. Just waiting.
One in the chat, Terry.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, so we're getting some questions from. Oh, no, it's fine. I can see the chat.
Okay, so this.
Yes,
this
you want to choose? Why don't you choose? Because there's so many things coming up.
Okay, so this one's from a gentleman called Steve. He submitted it in advance. He says that the biggest. So he says his children are totally addicted to devices and watching inappropriate, mind-numbing, banal content. And it's almost impossible to stop it. And that they've had that lots of problems trying. The biggest issue is that devices are now everyday requirements for school and education. So it's kind of counterproductive.
Sandra, one second. Sandra, 1 second. Alex, could you mute yourself?
Maybe on a different device.
Oh, we need Alex to mute. Alex? Alex? Oh, he can't hear us. Sandra, are you in the office with Alex?
I will run downstairs. Are you able to take the question from? Read it.
Is this by Steve Grew? Yes, I can see it. Yeah. So Steve's saying the biggest issue is that these tablets are now everyday requirements for education in schools. So removing or confiscating them is actually counterproductive to education. Parents try to encourage correct use, but you cannot sit with them all of the time. Trust is often broken, books often ignored. I would love to know how other parents deal with this modern day struggle. Which of our panelists would like to have a go at answering that question? None.
I don't mind starting, Terry.
Okay, thank you. And you saved us.
I think this is the nub of it. It's a really, really difficult question to answer. And the first thing is it will be different in different circumstances. Even within one family, I'm sure it will be different between two different children, and maybe different between parents and the way that they parent their children. And I think it's being all those things you were talking about being alert to the relationships and that rapport that you have with a child that is key. And if you've got enough rapport in the bank, then you may be able to start those conversations. I think the other thing that's really important is it's never too early to start having conversations. And in order to answer or to be able to debate and have a two-way conversation with your children about this sort of subject, you need to have sowed the seeds and talked about the fact that social media can be addictive. It can draw you in to it. It's designed to keep you on the platform for ages. I know, even with what I've learned since Molly's death, I can pick up my phone and I can sit there and waste 20 minutes or half an hour without trying, because I'm scrolling without purpose, and I have to consciously stop myself doing that. So if you have that conversation early on, as you start introducing the electronic devices, or as the school introduces, it makes it easier. But it's never too late to start, and it's always best to start as early as possible, and to increase, I suppose you could call it, digital literacy, so that everyone is we can educate each other. We can all help each other understand what it is we're playing with, the good sides as well as the bad sides.
Ian, thank you. And I'm going to see if anyone else wants to say anything. The one thing that I will say is that I can almost guarantee, Steve, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, well, you can put in the chat, that most of the times we're trying to have those conversations when you talk about removing, confiscating, is in a frustrated moment. When we're sitting there going, this is ridiculous. You've been on a thing for whatever hours and etc. and we're frustrated, etc. Which is not a good way in which to have those conversations. And I love the way, Ian, you bring in about debate. There's a respectful conversation where you've got a voice in it. I might make the ultimate decision. I'm a big believer in that. We can agree to disagree, but you have a voice in this, and you treat it with respect in the conversation. You have
Terry,
Anthony?
can I
Yeah?
say
Sure,
something
please.
in that regard? I think I agree very much with what Ian and you have said. I think there are different ways to approach this. One way is, in some ways, what's the best way, what rules are the best to put in place to try and minimize the harm that's done. Now, that comes from a good place as a parent, and one can try that. My children are 22 and 19 now. I certainly tried that along the way. I found that was pretty hard to implement consistently, and speaks to the point you made, Terry, very much about rapport, because as you say, the parental desire, which comes from a good and honest place to restrict, will come at odds and come up against the child's desire or need or want to use the device. So it becomes very difficult to implement consistently those rules. But you can have those and have the conversations and be upfront and transparent and mature as you can. But to counter that, it's about how do you develop the rapport best with your children. And the world of social media for both adults and children is a thought-created world that you're inhabiting. It's not really the real world of connection to people. I know this can come over as sounding dismissive and a little bit old-fashioned, but it isn't really the world of connecting directly with people or with nature or the living environments or with social structures and communities. It is in a different way, and there are some great benefits to it. But if you can find time as a parent to go out in nature, to kick a ball around with your child, you mentioned, I think, Terry, go to a football match or go to the ABBA show, whatever it might be that you want to do that is interactive rather than abstract, that's going to be a benefit. That's going to put those rapport in the bank account, as you said, put the rapport stronger so that when you do come to a moment when you try to have a constructive, and picking the right moment is absolutely the right thing.
Essential.
It is when you do come to have that conversation, you're in a better place. The rapport is stronger. You're both more likely to listen to what each other is saying and to be influenced. So I think that's almost the counter for me, is that how do you build up the strength of that really good relationship with your child? And it takes time. It takes being present. It takes effort. It takes all of that in an ongoing basis as a parent.
Yeah. And just before coming to see if you have anything to add, Yoav, I just wanted to say that I don't want to let that pass. And when you spoke about, what I call teachable moments, and it's something that iHeart's we're looking to release a new an online parenting program, and we talk about teachable moments, because most times we actually, if we're honest with ourselves, I think we could say that we teach our children is oftentimes when we're angry or upset, we start to lecture them. It comes from a place of lecturing and a place of urgency where we have to teach them this now. We have to correct them, put them right, And when things are going well and we're just hanging out and chilling together, as the kids say, we don't bring up teaching stuff. We don't start to educate our children because we think, everything's going well now. We don't want to, mess with that. But those are the moments when there's a good feeling amongst us that we want to slip in that kind of, and in a nice way, not in a sit down and I'm going to educate you something. But any of you guys see there was an article, something, I was on a lecture or an online webinar, they said this, what do you think about this? And that's when you start to, I want to share with you something that happened this week. I felt like someone really took away my good feeling. And it was something I was grappling with because I was thinking, how's that possible? So you start to just, in a way, without lecturing them, have those conversations in those moments.
Terry, the teachable moments, sorry, you're going to go to Yoav, but the teachable moments come all the time and every day. And in some ways, the most poignant moment or the most profound moment is when you do have some time with your child, whether it is outside in the park and you're going for a walk, or whether it is at home and you're having a conversation over dinner, is the teachable moment is not to be distracted by your own social media device. I mean, Ian mentioned something about that, and I'm as guilty as anyone. But that is an incredibly powerful teachable moment. So when you are present, to be present rather than to be absent yourself, and then you're helping, instructing without it being directly instructive.
And you know
Sorry.
what?
Yeah.
And just one other point is that often teenagers will rebut your things. You know, some of my teenagers, like at the time, said to me, "Oh, Mom, that's just your ideas. That's just what you teach." They all say to me now that they, you know, some of them are married, that they've left home. Everything you taught us helped us so much in life. Like, we wish we even could have listened a little deeper. But a lot of the time, you see the fruits of this messaging and this education coming later on. So don't get put off if they don't seem to be giving you the kind of be as receptive as you'd like in the moment. Yoav, over to you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to add was that I think the more open you are, because the one thing that I got away from, you know, teaching in schools and everything is how intelligent these young kids are. So I think the earlier that you open the communication and talk to them about, you know, the dangers of social media. I know there's that one documentary, Social Dilemma, on Netflix, which is incredibly, you know, educational and how it is set up to be so addictive. So I think, like you said, Terry, the less it is a lecture to them and the more it is an open conversation for the dangers of it, or like having that contract that you made with your son, you know, because then they're held accountable because they've put their word into it as well. And then, you know, you can't really argue against that. That is just. So I think the earlier you start to talk about it before they even get on these platforms, the more awareness they'll have.
Yeah, makes a very good point there. As a public health professional, social media is absolutely spot on. Social media is set up to be addictive. It becomes an addiction, literally something that is deliberately designed to make you want more of it and feel you have to have more of it in various ways and shapes and forms. And the Netflix documentary is helpful in that regard.
Yeah. And we spent a lot of time on that question, but it's worth it because I think it would be a lot of parents' questions, because especially when your children are on this laptop, they need it for school. I still feel that you can navigate your way around it. I used to go into a classroom and often I'd ask the children, do you use social media? Everyone said yes, and there were 3 who said no. And I'd say, why not? And they say, my parents just don't want me to. But everybody else is using it and it's on your, you know, and they were like, yeah, but our parents don't want us to. And they almost had obviously a strong enough rapport and a respect for their parent. There's a lot more influence we can have than we think we have. And a follow-on, I just want to say to Kirsten, who said, you know, Yoav, you were saying, and we've all kind of said the younger the better, but she said, my kids are 14 and 16. One worry I have is too little too late. Is there anything helpful for late starters? But I would say, Kirsten, it's never too little too late. Never. You know, and I think Ian would say that as well, having lost Molly, it's never too little too late. And the way I see it is that our children aren't the finished product until they get to the end of their lives, and they should live long and well and be healthy. None of us are. We all learning, we all students of life. And to start to learn, there's so many life lessons I've learned as an adult that have changed things for me and made life so much easier for me. A lot of my learning I did later in life. It's never, ever, ever too late to start to learn, I believe, as a human being. Okay, I'm going to see if there are any other. Sandra, are there any that you picked up on? Any other questions? Because I can't really see any more in the chat over here.
There was a question about somebody asked for a recommendation for a security app. Do you think security apps are a good solution for the problem? Because the person that their kids just keep hacking them.
Yeah, kids can be great hackers. So Ian, you maybe would have the best knowledge of this.
I think it's really hard. Security apps also possibly a solution, and they might be useful in certain circumstances, but they're very much the sort of thing that might drive a wedge between the generations, might stop the parents and the children having the conversations. It's far more important to have that channel of communication open and have conversations about things than to prevent. However, as a parent, one of the things the platforms themselves are doing is increasing parental controls. And they're usually, because they're embedded in the platform, they're usually a pretty good way of controlling a platform. So the burden of responsibility is passed from platform to parent on that occasion. It's another thing for parents to have to cope with. But if you can look into the platform's parental controls, I think that's a good place to go. As for individual security apps. There's a whole range of them. I think they're all, I don't know of one that is any better than others. Quite often you have to pay for them as well. But I would firstly look into the platform's own security measures that they are increasing at the moment, and see if that might help you.
Thanks, Ian. And another thing on that I wanted to say is that, and you kind of alluded to this, is that we don't want to enforce these things and our child feel like it's against their will, you know, and that we become adversaries in this so that they're looking to hack. I also had a hacker. I've got a hacker in the house. We want our child to feel like that they're allied with us in this. You know, what's interesting is most of my boys, 5 of them have now left home, and I often will send them something and they'll say to me, no, our filter blocked it. We didn't get it. They've chosen to put certain filters on their devices and on their laptops. And that's the ultimate game. You know, we might need to put some of those in, etc., if we feel it's really, you know, but ultimately we want our child to be wanting that for themselves, appreciating that. And that comes with the education.
It might be worth adding that, I mean, we had conversations about e-safety and being safe online. And we thought we followed each other on Twitter, for example, and we looked at each other's accounts, and it seemed that Molly, in all the family, was probably the least into social media. She didn't seem at all interested, and she deleted her Twitter account, and she deleted it because she didn't use it, and she really didn't use it because we followed her, and we thought, oh, well, fair enough. And we learnt through the inquest process, and we only learnt because the coroner had asked platforms to deliver data and asked the police to get access to Molly's devices and have a look at what she'd been doing online, that Molly had in fact left the Twitter account because we all followed it. And what she did was set up a secret Twitter account, and she used that very separately. As a cry for help, a vain cry for help. She was crying out to celebrities and influencers, some of whom had millions of followers, saying, I think I low-key want to kill myself. Please help me. And when you connect people who've got that number of followers, of course, your message is really hardly likely ever to get heard. And so I'd say there's an example of being very careful about how hard to push. And it underlines the importance of keeping a channel of communication as best you can, just talking about online safety on a regular basis, even when nothing unsafe has happened. Talking about the potential for it on a regular basis, I think, is really important.
Yeah. Any other questions, or are we going to wrap up? We've got a final short video to show, I know. Brian, Sandra, anything else that's come through?
If there isn't, Terry, there was one other point that I was
yes,
hoping,
that would be
hoping to make, but I'll just wait to see if there's any other questions, perhaps.
It doesn't seem so. So I'd like to hear from you a final point. Sandra, could you mute for a second? Because there's a feedback coming. I think a final point from you and also from Yoav would be nice to hear from you both.
Well, I was just thinking, listening to the remarkable work that Ian's done in the context of such tragedy, and it's really extraordinary the abilities that's had to help others. And in the context of the professional work I do, the public health work, we often think about in relation to mental health disorders, we think about what are the environmental and social factors that determine mental health problems, and what can one do, obviously, to support and improve those. And then we think about what kinds of services are needed to support people who already have mental health problems. The bit that gets left out a little bit, well, firstly, I get asked a lot, which should you focus on? And it's not an either or. Everything needs attending. It all needs attending to. We need to attend to the environmental and social factors, whether they are poverty, drug addiction, alcoholism, social media. There are a whole host of environmental factors that create the context in which mental health disorders develop and worsen. So those do need, and we focus today on social media in particular as one of those. And treatment services are sort of at the other end. that we need to have much better treatment services in this country and globally for mental health problems once they've arisen. We know there's a huge treatment gap and a huge burden of disease in children and young adults at the moment that is unmet. The service is not meeting those needs. But the bit in the middle, which is prevention, is the key bit in public health, because what we really want to do is not pick people out of the river downstream once they've fallen in. You want to stop people falling in the river in the first place. It's the sort of ABC of public health work, whether it's in smoking or alcoholism or mental health. And that's where the programs, Terry, that we're talking about, the iHeart programs, and there are others, of course. I was just reading the latest WHO report, which is on the web, about mental health problems. It's 200 pages long. There are some fantastic other educational programs around. But these programs, the Ignite program, the digital one that you showed some images of earlier, they are preventive programs trying to teach children and young adults, and I've benefited hugely from my learning over the last decade, an understanding of how the mind and the psychological system works, that, as you said, helps the child navigate the path rather than changing the path. And I think that it's sometimes lost, that where that fits into this jigsaw of how we try and address and attend to, as a society, this huge problem with all the upset and tragedy that's caused through mental health. So for me that's the vitality of the preventive aspect, and I thought I'd just make that point.
Thank you, Anthony. It's an excellent point, and thank you for highlighting it. Yoav, what would you like to add on this topic, this conversation?
Yeah, I'll just follow on from what you said, Anthony. Like, I think the key point we've been talking about a lot is education for kids. And, if I look back on my whole era of education, going from, primary school, high school, then to university, I think the most important thing I've ever learned was the iHeart course. Literally 10 hours of my life has, had a knock-on effect to all these other areas of my life that I'm experiencing. But the most essential and, part of my education was the iHeart course. Understanding how my psychological system works and, preventing, all of these things that happen to us when we don't have that kind of information to us and we're ignorant, And I think that is the tragedy, is that kids don't have access to this kind of information that I was so privileged to get. That's why I love teaching it in schools and why we all love, supporting this charity. So I know you said earlier, Terry, that it's not everyone has access to it, and that you can still find, these kind of messages in other places. But ultimately, I think these programs need to be made more available. It's almost our duty as people who know about it to share it to as many people as possible, because it is life-changing. And I can only speak from my own experience. For me, it was life-changing. So the more these kind of programs are pushed out, like you were saying, Anthony, the better it will be for society as a whole and for young people in relations to all things, not just social media.
Could I, Terry, just say one thing in response to that, which is, firstly, I thought you did a great job on Ignite. Thank you very much for doing that. But secondly, it's that preventive aspect. And I know the publishers, Brian alluded to it earlier, but that's exactly where my inspiration came, from both professional interest, but also strong family background and interest in experience of significant psychological health problems. But that's what inspired me to, because of the dearth, I think, apart from iHeart and some others, of really good preventive campaigns, to use fiction as a vehicle. That's what Brian was alluding to earlier. My series, the Don't Doubt the Rainbow series, where there are 2 books, The 5 Clues and Outside Chance. But they are essentially detective adventure fiction books for 11 to 16-year-olds that have the messages that iHeart uses embedded through those. And what I'm trying to do there is to use the vehicle of fiction as a preventive program alongside other educational programs to provide the tools and support with mental health. I think that's where a lot of attention needs to be given.
Thanks, Anthony. And can you just a shout out for those books, because again, that's such a great way through this, and it is an incredibly compelling, page-turning fiction novels, where people can get those?
They can get them anywhere in bookshops. They've been shortlisted over the last 2 or 3 years for, I think, about 6 or 7 international awards. But the most exciting thing for me, I wasn't intending to do a promo for my books here, but we are talking about prevention of mental health disorders. The most exciting thing, I do a lot of visits to schools. I talk to children, I have a lot over the last 3 or 4 years across this country and even more so internationally about mental health problems. And the excitement is, for me, is just like I think with you and your courses, was when a child has or a young person has taken something positive in terms of psychological well-being from the books, as well as enjoyed the books, hopefully. So they can get them anywhere. You can get them in any country on Amazon, and you can get them in bookshops in the UK and lots of other platforms. You just have to Google them.
Okay, so
Brian, I just wanted to say one thing to wrap up before you come in, which is just circling right back to Ian. Ian is a great example of, I can guarantee you from watching you, Ian, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, this was not an easy path that he has trailblazed. It's not like he's seen the results he wanted up front, or even, along the way. There've been a lot of disappointments. He told you about after the inquest, the kind of, what came back from Meta and Instagram, how disappointing it was. But he's not deterred by that. He's he's committed to this path of making, of helping us kind of develop seatbelts for our children while they're traveling in cars, essentially. And that's the thing I wanted to say. I think that's the mentality. To me, that's a resilient mentality, even of a parent, is to know that we need to start this education process, whether it's by buying Anthony's books, doing an iheart program, having our own discussions, developing our rapport. And we might not see the results straight away, but I can guarantee you, I've just seen in life, I think we all have as parents, everyone who's on this, listening to this, that when you're committed to something and you stay with it, it does produce the results in the end, even if it's slower than we'd like. So that's just my final kind of 2 cents. And thank you, everybody. Thanks, Anthony, Yoav, and Ian. It's been just fantastic. I hope people have got benefit tonight. I've certainly enjoyed it, so thank you.
So thank you to everyone, a brilliant panel, and also a big thank you to you, Terry, for the heroic act of flying overnight 12 hours and then doing this with everything else going on under challenging circumstances. So brilliant panel. Thank you to everybody, and also thank you to other members of the iheart team, Joe, Alex, Charlotte, Sandra, and everyone else who's participated to make tonight a big success. So thank you. Before we wrap up, though, I said we've got till 9. We won't take you right till 9 UK time, but just a couple of very important points. First of all, Anthony is not the only author. And so I said to Alex, I grabbed my book. So we've also got this book for maybe slightly older audience, teenagers, and Escaping the Illusion. And you can also get it on Amazon, but I don't have a big fancy book deal with Crown House. So so please not make my mother not the only person who buys my book on Amazon. So please do feel free. It's a novel also teaching the core teachings of our work, of these core principles of well-being and resilience, through a thriller novel that I've been told, at least by my son, he's asked me to write a sequel. So my 11-year-old, so I feel quite excited about that. Just don't have the time. Very briefly, just answering a few questions. We're going to put in the chat in a moment the ability to purchase Ignite, because some people have asked, how can we get hold of the Ignite program that Terry was showing earlier for children who are not in a school? And of course, not every school is showing Ignite. So we'll put that. It was put in the chat earlier, but we're going to put it back in a moment. Alex will stick it in. And we're trying to make it absolutely as affordable as possible for a family. It's £29 to get the entire program. And if that is not affordable to somebody for some reason, please let us know. Come get in touch at info@iheartprinciples.com or through our website, and we'll make sure that it is manageable for every family. We don't want anybody not to be able to have that program. It's for children aged 9 to 13. And Terry was showing it earlier. We really want everyone to be able to access that. So in addition, and it's a very, very powerful program that's getting some extraordinary results in schools and communities and families already. We've got a podcast. Terry and Ian have done a podcast many of you might know about. Please access the podcast channel.
I just want to say Anthony's also a guest. His hasn't been released, but we've also recorded an episode, and we'd love to have you too.
And also, I've been told I might be a podcast guest one day. So look through. So that's called The Resilience Files. The Resilience Files, where Terry hosts some fascinating. We've already got about 10 or 12 of these episodes. 6 have been 10 or 12 recorded. 6 or 7 have gone out already. So please look at that on our Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it, all those social media channels that I don't use properly. And then also the question has come in, if people want to get access to this recording or share it with others, please refer them to the iHeart YouTube page, the podcast YouTube page. Sorry? Resilience Files YouTube page. Sorry, Alex has just instructed me. I was told my sound was rubbish, so I came to move to, I've taken over Alex's and got my fancy headgear, as you can see here. So the Resilience Files YouTube podcast page is where you'll be able to get recording of this. We're going to wrap up now, but there's a special video we'd like to share for 2.5 minutes in conclusion. I mentioned earlier about the iHeart annual fundraising campaign. We've had some very, very generous donors who have match funded for this campaign, which means that every pound donated will be matched and doubled. It's coming up on the 12th and 13th of March. We'd like to give you a sneak preview. The first people seeing the video that will be going out. And after this, so we'll be in touch. If anybody would like to help fundraise for us by being an iHeart champion, which means you go out to your network and help to support our work, please step forward and let us know. Send me an email directly, brian@iheartprinciples.com, or reach us via the website. And we'd love to have you as part of the campaign, either helping to raise funds by reaching out to your networks or supporting us. And we really appreciate all of the support you give us. The generosity is what enables our work to get to as many young people and people in need as possible. And here is 2 minutes, 30 seconds, the first viewing of the campaign video, a sneak preview for everyone.
I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't know what it was. I felt very victimized, felt very stuck, felt very alone.
I wouldn't be able to enjoy myself and be myself because I was feeling very insecure and I wasn't feeling confident.
Felt completely out of control. Didn't sleep for a few months, really consistently. And it was just, yeah, really crazy, very dark period.
I was suffering really badly with disordered eating, with a lot of obsessional thinking, self-harming, just feeling really, just not really knowing where to kind of turn and not really knowing where to look. And it just seemed like I'd seen a lot of therapists by that point, and every single piece of therapy wasn't working for me, and I just didn't know what to do.
So many of our young people are struggling with crippling and poor mental health. They feel stuck, broken, and hopeless. They are desperate for help. iHeart can help them. We educate and empower our youth with the knowledge that well-being and resilience is built in. This gives them hope, the essential hope that not only can they survive in life, but that they can thrive in life.
What's developed is the knowledge that, like, that's just my thinking and it doesn't affect me. And before, like, it used to consume me.
Like now when I go to weddings or social events, I'm just okay. Like I'm fine because I know that I'm okay. I know that I'm okay no matter what.
I'm not saying it for the sake of it. It completely changed my life, like, let alone get me out of the place I was in.
And it's the most life-changing piece of knowledge to know that as human beings, we are able to experience such an incredible range of emotions. And even when they feel so awful that you feel like you can't even breathe, you know that at the end of it, you're going to be okay.
Imagine a future where all our young people have the confidence that they are okay no matter what they are facing. This campaign is about creating that future. iHeart has helped over 40,000 people in 23 countries since we launched our charity just a few short years ago. Please donate now and help us to reach many more young people in need.
So that is our campaign, Igniting Resilience in Our Youth, which is, as we said, will be, please don't donate now. I mean, you're welcome to go to the iHeart website and donate now if you will, if you wish to, more than welcome. But the campaign is launched properly for 36 hours on the 12th and the 13th of March. Wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight, all our guest speakers and panelists and everybody else. We hope you've had a special time. It's been a pleasure to do this with each other, and we look forward to continuing the journey about learning about our well-being and our resilience and powering up our parental influence together. Thank you and good night, everyone.